As a creative entrepreneur, you probably started your business because of the passion that you had for what you do. But the thing that's going to keep you in business, that would be making money, being a profitable business, keeping the lights on, hitting your income goals, all of that so you can actually serve and impact more people, right? I'm a sales copywriter and brand and launch strategist, so the whole finance and numbers and math side of business did not come naturally to me when I first started my business back in 2016. I typically talk about marketing in my videos, but for this one, what I wanted to do is break down some of the business financial issues that have come up, the solutions that I've put in place, some of the finance rhythms I have, all of that, so by the end of this video, you can be more confident in your business numbers. I promise you, if I can figure this out, you can too. We're talking about how your clients and customers are making decisions about money, and then in turn, how we can communicate that in your copywriting. Overall, there are 4 big buying patterns or styles that we see. And first up, we have the analyst. This is your client or customer that is making money decisions based on a thinking style that values, in large part, logic, facts, quantitative evidence, and, well, analysis. This kind of person likes numbers, they're competitive, they're naturally critical, they're a realist. They're a logical thinker, they're allergic to fluff, they're the show me the money, what's the ROI, what's my investment gonna get back? And so the elements that we need to use in our copy that are important to this type of buyer are things like tables and grids of information, price anchoring, or as I call it inside copywriting for creatives, the Starbucks test, because we've all purchased something before, and in the buying process you hear something like, you could skip your weekly coffee addiction for a month and you could afford this subscription. That's price anchoring, and we want to have that in our copy. Remember, these kind of people, they want to know the ROI. Next up is the planner, or like I call it in that quiz, this is the poised and polished type buyer. By the way, I didn't pull this out of my booty. This is based off of something called the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument. This buyer loves a to-do list, is very methodical, a naturally detailed sequential thinker who is allergic to disorder. They want the step-by-step plan. This is what I get every time I take my quiz. When someone like me is looking at your website or your landing page copy, I am looking for the timeline because I have a goal in mind that I want to get to. I'm looking to see how you are going to keep up your end of the deal and help me get there as quickly as possible. I want the agenda, I want the offer crystal clear to me. This type of buyer tends to be a little more risk averse. Remember, they're the planner, so make sure you have that good, well-branded guarantee prominently on your offer page. Moving on to number 3, and hopefully at this point you're starting to see that this is why long-form copy works so well, or more of a long-form page. There's a time and a place for a short squeeze page. What I want you to think about is how to make your website and set it up to be a framework of different places, like chapters in a book, places where they could slot in and say, you know what, I'm interested in that, I don't care about that, read on. This will work. Long form copy, people will still read, people will not read boring copy. So don't be so concerned on making everything just so short on the page. Make your words count. Say what you need to say and move on. Okay, number 3, this is what I call the whimsical visionary. Most of my audience tends to be towards this. I work with a lot of creatives, artists, makers, entrepreneurs, and, well, visionaries. This type of buyer is super conceptual, imaginative, they're future focused, they're thinking about the dream, about the vision. They like surprises, they're a little bit impetuous, more of a risk taker. They visualize thinking, and this buyer is allergic to inflexibility and rigidness. So here's some things that I try to do in my copy to speak to this type person. One thing I'll do is always supplement my copy with some sort of visual element to help communicate the words, whether that's really good brand photography or imagery or a diagram or infographic. You also want to use a technique in your copy with this type buyer that's called future pacing. So in an email funnel, for example, I want to tell them what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes after they take action on what it is that I've presented. I want to tell them what's going to happen in the next 5 months and then help them paint a picture of what could happen 5 years from now. Fun and imaginative copy performs well with this audience. That's why don't be afraid to bring in a story or an anecdote. If you're on my email list, you see I do this a lot. It is kind of my natural writing style, but the more that I've seen my audience really respond to it, I've leaned into that more. Last up, we have the charmer. This is our winsome, expressive, and passionate decision maker when it comes to money, spending, and buying. This is your client or customer who loves emotion. They're very humanistic, very empathetic. They're naturally a great coach or listener. They hate hidden agendas and connect fiercely to shared values. Okay, so elements you want to include in your copy to make sure you're speaking to this type of buyer. You knew I was going to say it. Story. Story matters so much to these people. One way to do that is in your case case studies and your testimonials, making sure you're painting a great picture, that before and after that's so important. Don't be afraid to talk about yourself, personal anecdotes, information about your family or your team. This is the type of buyer that's going to your about page and is going to be so interested to see if they've got anything in common with you. If you think your audience is a lot of people like this, consider having some sort of a sales video or brand trailer that they can use. Again, they want this story. They want to feel like they're a part of it. They're soaking it up. They can step inside your world. How to create a business budget. I'm going to take you behind the scenes of my Financial Friday workflow plan, and you're going to hear my thoughts on when it's time to invest versus when it's time to rest. Starting with how to create a business budget. My number one tip for you is figure out what you need to bring in. What does your take home need to be? In my opinion, it makes no sense to set up your business budget or your pricing structure otherwise. So that's step one. Set your salary off of what your take home needs to be. It wasn't until I stepped into being an entrepreneur and ran my own business that I started to see the beauty in this. Instead of having this capped salary that I was always going to run against, I was able then to see more of a little bit of breadth and opportunity, because now I know what I need to bring in. So that brings me over to step two. Figure out what the cost of doing business is, essentially what I need to have to keep the lights on over here. This is your overhead, all your software expenses, all your cost of goods, payroll. Now, when I first started, all it really was a few software subscriptions, my laptop, me, that was about it. Now I've gotten so detailed that anytime I join anything new or have any kind of software that I sign up for, I go straight to my business blueprint. I pop open this tab on the spreadsheet and I add that cost in because I want to know every single month what it costs to keep the lights on. Step number three, now you want to set your pricing and how many slots you have or how many units of product you need to be sold. You want to set that based off now that you know what you got to have to keep the lights on, you know what you need to make, and you're also going to take into account industry rates. Here's my little hot, spicy take. Just because you love something doesn't mean you need to charge your worth. I kind of hate that phrase sometimes. Or do what you love and the money will follow. And there's economic principles out there that we have to pay attention to. Maybe nobody wants what you're trying to sell. If I know that my services-based business needs to bring in $100,000 a year because I'm thinking 30% goes to the house, to the business, I'm thinking 30% is going to the government, 30% I get to take home. Again, these are very rough numbers. And I know my package is $4,000, then I need about 25 clients a year, which boils down to 2-ish a month. Does that sound absolutely exhausting? Do I even have time for that? Maybe I need to raise my prices. Maybe I need to raise the value of what I'm giving them. But that's a basic snapshot of how I like to work backwards to figure out what my business budget needs to be. Here's some quick rules of thumb I've learned over the years. I try to stay in the sweet spot of about 60% costs and 40% profit. So that means monies that I can reinvest into the business, I can invest somewhere else, I can count as owner's draw, I can give away. You may be able to run more at like 50-50, which is awesome. I wanted to take you behind the scenes and tell you about my Finance Friday workflow. When I say that, it's always a hashtag in my head, so we'll say Finance Friday with a hashtag. Okay, stick with me through these steps. I saved the best one, paying yourself, for next to last. So I start with personal, and I'm gonna categorize expenses. Remember, back in the very first part of this video, I told you about how I know what I need to have my take home be, and I know overall what our personal spending plan is. So for me, what's been easiest over time is to use a tool like mint.com. So every Friday I can take a couple of minutes, look back over the past 7 days and categorize different expenses into the budget area they fall in. So was that Target expense baby formula, goes into baby supplies or groceries, or was it a gift for somebody and it needs to go in that budget? Step 2 on Finance Friday, pay off all credit cards. Yes, I said credit cards. Personal ones are paid off weekly, looking at you, William Sonoma. But in the business, if you're disciplined enough to pay things off in full, it can definitely be of value to you to get a credit card, I've learned. Step 3, the next thing I do is make sure that accounts receivable is paid up, which is a very fancy way to make sure you're paid for what you've done. Our clients pay in HoneyBook, so I look in HoneyBook and make sure that there's no delinquent payments I need to check in on. I do the equivalent of looking in your pocket to make sure there's not 20 bucks lying around. I took what I learned in Sheena's blueprint model and I kind of blended it with this. So here's what I do. I basically have an envelope system. So all of the different payments are going to one big folder. It's an account, but I call it a folder. And so every single Friday, after I've done these first 3 steps, I get to log in and see how much is in that folder. That is a great gut check, because now that I've been doing this for years, I know if that number is low, that kind of worries me. I know if it's tracking high. It is a fantastic gut check. Whether it's clients, digital courses, affiliate fees, anything has gone to that folder. I'm looking at that, and now I start to separate it out. I put 10% to profit. I put 15% to taxes, 55% to operating expenses. To sound cool, I call that OPEX. And I put 20% into an owner's draw folder. Again, I'm saying folder. These are accounts. But if you've ever run into Dave Ramsey's curriculum, the concept of envelopes makes visual sense to me. So that's what I do. But the last big step of my Finance Friday routine, I used to do on Fridays, actually do on Mondays now. We have a spreadsheet in my business where we track our KPIs. So all the big numbers and ways to measure success in different areas of the business. So every single Monday I look and I see what we have brought in sales year to date, what has gone right out the door year to date again, and then what that percentage is. Now that goes way up and down depending on launches and a lot of other factors, but it's a good weekly report card. How to know when you need to raise your prices and how exactly to do it. Okay, number 1 is also the least emotional reason for a price hike. This is gonna be so easy to see if you have a physical product-based businesses, but service providers and digital product-based businesses, you're not off the hook. More on that in a sec, but I know a lot of people that follow me fall into that first group, and you have a high material costs. You're a floral designer or a jewelry designer, or you do baking. Shout out to Kelsey. She's a student inside Copywriting for Creatives. Talked to her a few times recently. People like Kelsey and floral designers also remind me that some of you have an inventory that expires, and you have to factor that into your cost of goods, which is a whole nother thing. Unless your cost base has gone down recently, which is probably unlikely, then cost of goods going up due to things like inflation, that's probably meaning your income overall is decreasing. Okay, but service providers or digital product providers, back to you. You may see inflation starting to affect some of your software prices, but think about client gifting, for example. We like to keep our client gifting to about 3% of your total package costs. We found that to be a great number over the years. And even in our client gifts, those have gone up. They're a physical gift, and we also ship them, so shipping rates have gone up. All of that is something I need to be hyper aware of. Yes, my time is one of the cost of goods factored into my services packages, but so is the client gift. Number 2, you're booking out easy, you're closing, filling those spots, no problem. First of all, way to go you, pat yourself on the back. Secondly, if you're converting about 80% either of your inquiries or people that you hop on the phone with, then you probably need to raise your rates. This is interesting too. Some coaches would even say 80% is on the high end, just throwing that out there. But if you consistently book out and fill all your spots, this may be a time to consider your rates. Number 3, you need to make sure that your hard costs are about 40% of the overall charge of the package or the finished product. This kind of relates to clue number 1, but I do like that number of about 40%. When you break it down and you look at the fact that all the profit that comes into your business, once you get that profit back and you're saving your big chunk for taxes and you're paying the house, the cost of goods, then what's left over, that profit margin, if you're sticking to that 40-50% range, then you're looking at like a 20 to 40% profit margin, which is what I like to stick in. Reason number 4, it's simply been a long time since you've raised your prices at all. This was me, and usually always is me. Some experts say you need to look at your prices and up them every 6 to 9 months just due to what things cost in the world. I go about a year to a year and a half before I raise my prices, which is on the longer end. I've personally found that raising our rates has little to no effect on the booking average. Perceived value is a thing. And the beauty of upping your prices, even just by a few percentage points. And clue number 5, you do mystery shopping or price comparison with your competitors and you find you're a little bit on the low end. We worked through this last year. We have a client who absolutely is in a luxury market, and she was doing some deep research into figuring out what the application process looked like with her competitors, with the people that her brides were also looking to work with. It was good for her from a pricing standpoint to see, yep, I am right there in the middle of the pack. I'm competitively priced here. But it was fascinating because we got to get in there and see from a messaging standpoint, both with her brand message and with the sales copy we were using, how we could get in there and speak to these people maybe a little bit better than her competitors were. The second part of the video, I want to talk through how to do it, because again, if you're like me, the anxiety set in, and I was telling my husband all the reasons why I did not need to raise my price. For me, it always comes back to, I think the minute I up my prices, crickets will start. No one is gonna reach out if we raise our rate, but that just tends not to be true. First step here, obviously, is decide what that price point is gonna be and be able to argue for it well. Once you've picked this number, step one. Step two, you wanna consider, how is this price going to affect my customers or clients? If a candle that I love raises their prices 10%, I'm probably not really gonna notice, but my brand photographer upped her rates and I absolutely noticed. So you wanna consider that, and if you're a service provider, here's what you wanna do. The best way that I've done it over the years is start at the back of the funnel or the experience and work towards the first things that they see, like your website or that booking process. So I start at the contract. I look through the entire contract and make sure that that new price point is communicated and I've got that number correct, because you don't want to mess up there. Those payment plans need to go up a little bit as well. You're not a bank, you can't just bankroll people. I have messed this up 100%, but yes, remember that on a payment plan, you do kind of lose money as a business. So accommodate for that. Once you get your contract done, I move back to the next step for us is the proposal itself that goes out to potential clients. So I'm going to go through that and make sure that the numbers are accurately reflected. I've got another tip here, so stay tuned till the end of the video. Then I work backwards again to the pricing magazine. I make sure that I've got that all set with the new reflected pricing. And then the last step is updating pricing on my website. I am team list your prices on your website. I have my reasons. Again, that's a whole nother video. It boils down to this: by not listing your price or giving them any sort of zone to think in, a lot of times people just think if you don't list your prices, it's too expensive for them, it's too exclusive. So you want to give them some sort of frame of reference to think in. If you have a recurring service like an agency type model, or you've got a membership and you need to up rates on that, here are some tips that I've told some of our students inside Copywriting for Creatives recently. You've pretty much got two options here. Number one, you can choose to grandfather everybody in that trusted you initially. I love this option because some people trusted you back when you had no track record and they just went for it with you. I kind of like to honor that person. Again, this brings up discretion. You're going to have to look at your own numbers. This creates loyalty. You may also just give them an increased rate but lower than the sticker price that new people are paying. You've got some options there, and you definitely want to communicate regardless that your prices are going up. You want to let them know whether it's affecting them or not. But option number two is, if you're raising it for everybody, here's what I recommend. The biggest tip here, you have to answer the "what's in it for me" question. That's who they care about. You want to show them the value. Explain how this price hike is working to benefit them. It means you can hire more team members. It means you can buy premium products that go into making whatever it is that you give to them. Customers and clients always appreciate transparency, so explain to them why. That brings me to the last part of this video. I wanted to give a couple of pro tips. Number one, on value. When you're trying to think of ways that this benefits people who are going to be paying a little bit more, look for ways that you can sell your sawdust. That's not my phrase. I've never been able to find who coined it, but what in your services process, for example, do you do by nature of you executing the service to create the deliverable for your client, that you might as well just give them that. You created it, it is on the chopping block, it's not one of the final deliverables, but you could add value to that client and not add any more time to your process, and just go ahead and give them that too. A good client experience, that's something I'm very passionate about. That's something that is an absolute added value. The second pro tip I have though, if you've never invested the price of your product or service in someone else to go through the client experience and see what it's like to spend 3 figures or 4 figures or 5 figures, I highly recommend it. That is an education, and it will change your client experience for sure. My last pro tip here to wrap up is go ahead and grocery store receipt your offer. To point back to the Sweet 16 sales page and services page, this walks you through that. But I have found when I'm raising my rates, if I go through line iteming out every single thing that I provide as a deliverable or a part of the process along the way, and I figure what is the cost of goods that goes into that, whether it's time, if there is some physical product involved, every step of that, and I figure out the number for that, I add them all up. Usually that makes me feel pretty good about raising the prices, because I see, yes, there's a lot that goes into this. Let me know below if there's any questions that you have. I know I mentioned a ton of resources too, so I'll link those down below as well. I do have an anatomy of the perfect services page. You could use that for your pricing magazine as well. That's a freebie. I'll put that below this video for you to grab. Once you've got your new rates locked in and communicated, you're going to be ready for more eyes to be on your business. So be sure to watch the next video I've got teed up for you. I'm taking you behind the scenes on how I write a media pitch template. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.